Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every day we meet the minds that are shaping the future of technology, securing the future, and giving us a glimpse behind the scenes. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today I'm thrilled to have yet another very special guest joining us today from Jones Lang LaSalle, or JLL. And if you've not heard of them, they are one of the world's leading real estate services companies. And I've invited Doug Shepard, the Senior Director of Offensive Security and Global Insider Risk, to join us on the podcast today. But what does that mean? What is his job? What does his day look like? Well, put quite simply, is to ensure the cybersecurity of a billion-dollar organisation spread across 80 countries. And if that doesn't sound daunting enough, he is also in charge of safeguarding a decentralized workforce. And so I've invited him on the podcast today to share some of the challenges and the ingenuity required to protect such a vast and varied ecosystem. And by that, I mean from navigating the maze of international privacy laws and regulations to managing real-time visibility into a staggering 100,000 endpoints. So from the trials of remote working and the issues of intermittent endpoint state checks to the game-changing solutions like Tanium that are helping streamline their processes, I think Doug's expertise and experience will give us all a first-hand look into what it really takes to stay a step ahead in this high-stakes world of cybersecurity. So with that scene set, I'm now going to ask you all, wherever you're listening in the world, to buckle up and hold on tight, because it's time for me to beam your ears all the way to East Tennessee, where Doug is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Doug. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Doug Shepard, and I run the offensive security group at Jones Lang LaSalle, as well as our insider threat group. And I come from an offensive security and counterintelligence background and got my big start in that industry at the National Security Agency in what used to be known as the Tailored Access Operations Group. I've been to 40 plus countries. I've lived in the Middle East, and I really have a passion for hacking and finding bad guys.
Oh, man, what a cool story that is, man. I absolutely love it. And with the rapid shift to remote work in recent years, I've got to ask, what are the key challenges that you faced in maintaining things like cybersecurity across 80 country operations and decentralized workforces, and that expectation that we all have to work from any device, any location, any network at any time?
Right. So this was definitely a big and immediate change for us because we, like everybody else, just immediately switched to a completely new way of doing work when COVID hit, right? Like completely upended things. You go from your security posture, assuming all this big metal that you've purchased over the last 15 years to protect your perimeter is going to be your defense in depth, right? Like you've spent all this money, made all these investments, and then suddenly every single one of your employees is working at home with like an unpatched 11-year-old Linksys router with a password that can be cracked in 1 second, right?
Yeah.
And so I really do mean the royal we when I say that, because this is everybody in the industry. We sort of just went forth with this model and then started to realize that our security architecture, the threats we were defending against in that landscape had almost inverted, right? So we had one model, and then almost overnight we flipped a switch and it almost inverted like that. So, our data centers were safe and our networks were safe, but there weren't any, people in seats that our physical security stack was actually protecting anymore. And all of a sudden, our network went from like the internal range that you're protecting to everybody's home in the world, right? And of course, no one's disaster recovery plan really addressed any of this happening, right? And in fact, I used to be in disaster recovery 20 years ago. And I can tell you it was generally assumed back then that if no employees could ever make it to any office, it was essentially the apocalypse, right? Like they sort of just hand waved that as, well, if no one can ever get to the office, then it means that, that we've been nuked or something like that. And COVID sort of proved that, no, that's not necessarily what that means. And, we needed way more visibility into our endpoints, which had all previously been inside of a JLL office before 2020.
And I was doing a little research on you guys before you came on the podcast. I was reading how JLL previously experienced issues with only actually seeing the status of some endpoints every 75 days when a password change was enforced. And we've come a long way since then. So I've got to ask, How did this impact the organization's security posture then? And how has the adoption since of solutions like Tanium improved this situation?
Absolutely, yeah. So I have made the statement before that for most of our endpoints, we were only seeing them every, on average, 75 days, because that's when we were forcing the password reset, and we don't have an always-on VPN. We're not forcing people to do that.
Yeah.
So we were pushing out patches with MECM or SCCM or whatever Microsoft is calling it these days. But if you talk to patching engineers, they almost all say 95% of the time it works 50% of the time, right? So I couldn't agree with that anymore. So, we were pushing out the patches, but we also had an EDR solution, like a security endpoint solution, that would alert us if there was a detection on one of those laptops, right? Like if it had downloaded malware or something we were going to detect. But yeah, absent like an issue that the EDR would identify, most of these devices, we just were not seeing them very often, just whenever we forced that password change. And our security model went from saying, hey, everything is fine with this laptop because there aren't any errors being thrown, right? Like that was the old paradigm. We shifted to a model where we could say, hey, this laptop is fine because we baselined it and there's been no unauthorized software installed on it in the last hour. Security patches matched what we think that they should be within the last hour. The users who think that we should be logging into it have been logging into it in the last hour. So yeah, we completely changed our paradigm in security from no alerts, so it's green, to actually that verification for those endpoints. It went from more of like responding to issues to reducing the opportunity for issues, if that makes sense. But also from like an insider risk standpoint, our previous level of visibility into laptops that weren't in the building, it was extremely challenging to keep like a disaffected employee who decided to steal that laptop and even figure out what had happened to it, right? Like if we couldn't figure out if it was still being turned on, if it was being used, if they were trying to extract data from it even. And then all of a sudden, the visibility issues that we had sort of just evaporated because nowadays, as long as that device is on and connected to any network, we can make like real-time quantifications about it with Tanium.
And I also learned that JLL operates in, I think, 80 countries. So with that, of course, comes, I would imagine, varying privacy laws and regulations and so many other challenges too. So how does the organization ensure compliance while maintaining a robust security strategy? And are there any unique approaches that you've taken to overcome these differing restrictions? Because I would imagine from the outside looking in, it's tremendously challenging, 80 countries.
Yeah, no softball questions here today.
Nah, sorry, man.
Neil, I'm going to be honest, the answer to your question is that we very carefully handle that, right? But yeah, it's definitely a challenge. We have global technology priorities that sort of get pushed down from the mothership up top, right? But we still maintain a lot of local presence and infrastructure and legal and compliance oversight all around the globe for that very reason, right? There's probably no single policy or tool or security template that any company as big as ours could apply globally. But maybe the only exception to that would be like password complexity. Like you can make people have a password at least 10 characters long, but that's probably the only thing that you could apply globally, and everything else, a lawyer or, a privacy expert is going to want to weigh in on. Vendors are getting better about GDPR, about privacy, about compliance, and that really helps when you're deploying at scale, but also sensitizing legal and compliance individuals in all of the areas that we operate in. And just talking about what we're doing and, the security direction of the company is really critical to maintaining those important privacy protections. And I don't actually think our implementation of that local expertise model is really that unique around firms that are as significantly global as we are, right? And our challenge is really sort of the opposite, to be that one JLL and ensuring that we're all playing off the same sheet of music, right? Even if the languages are a little different on that sheet of music, we're still playing off of it, and it's still what we're expecting to do, and that those offices are compliant with what the big goals are, but also maintaining privacy and compliance.
And I suspect for most people listening, they will see all those cyber attacks and breaches and the stories and headlines filling up their newsfeed, but you're someone right in the eye of the storm. You get to hear about this stuff every day and fixing the problems around it a lot of the time. So I'm curious, can you provide some insights around some of those top cyber threats JLL and other organizations are facing today, and how you have adjusted your cybersecurity strategy to address these evolving threats effectively? Because it's a constantly moving target and almost a game of whack-a-mole, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I'm thrilled that you're asking this question because I can't answer this. The biggest threats are ransomware caused by users clicking things followed by not patching.
Yeah.
Right? And that's everyone else's problem. And despite security guys like me saying that for the last 15 or 20 years, there's still 1,000 vendors at RSA every year selling magic bullets, right? A third of those companies who won't even exist in 3 or 4 years. And they're all purporting to solve your security problems. So, there are a lot of issues that big organizations face because they're trying to evolve to counter threats. But they can't do that until they understand what their own security landscape is. And they're chasing security, whether it's because of audit or because they've been breached or because a business partner is making them. But really, proper security is a foundation of understanding your organization and taking basic security principles and applying them to your organization and then verifying that they're effective. And, I'd say in an organization, even a tenth of the size of JLL and our tech footprint, I'm not sure how you'd get that foundational understanding and verifying that your security posture is aligned without a tool like Tainting, right? That is what gave us that certainty to be able to say, we have these expectations about our security, and now we can confirm those expectations. In terms of, are we effective in countering the cyber threats? I would like to think that we are now a lot more than we were a couple years ago. Otherwise, I should probably be fired because I'm way too expensive to be delivering non-improvement.
Love it. And when I was doing research on you guys, again, one of the things that really stood out for me about JLL is this ability to have real-time visibility into more than 100,000 endpoints. Incredibly impressive. So I'm curious, again, if we zoom out, how has this enhanced visibility transformed your incident response capabilities and overall security posture? Because I think every tech project now is always judged on the ROI and the value and what it actually offers. So I'm curious what it's delivered for you guys.
Another great question. So our IR guy would probably say he has a lot less free time now. And again, as the red team guy, I don't think I'm his favorite person. When you go through sea change levels of improvement in visibility into an organization as big as JLL, it's going to be very challenging to immediately get this, giant fire hose of data that you never had, and then immediately need to start triaging issues, right? Like that's sort of your day one experience. And it's not like the tooling you just purchased came with new personnel spend. So there's a lot of figuring out how you can evolve and mature your security organization when your security stack almost overnight matures that much, right? So we're way more aware of things that were going on before the deployment of Tanium. But at the end of the day, I have to remind people that, those things have been happening for years, and it didn't start happening on the day that we could see them, right? And so it's important to sort of keep that perspective too when you're deploying these tools. But in terms of IR specifically and being able to have that endpoint introspection and have a clear picture of what right looks like, it makes it way easier to detect and remediate wrong, or in the good cases, if you're lucky, stop wrong from even happening because you catch some misconfiguration or patch issue early before it becomes a problem.
And benchmarking IT risk levels against industry peers is also an intriguing approach to measuring security effectiveness. So can you expand on how JLL performs this benchmarking process and how it has impacted decision-making within the organization? Because again, I think incredibly valuable to anyone listening.
Absolutely. So the concept of industry peers is really interesting when your business is skyscrapers, right? Because it's not like there's a lot of players in the market at our size and capitalization. But we do look at security cost to serve, where we try to tie the average cost of an FTE or a full-time employee in each of our security groups with the security function of that group. And so, for instance, I just went through this with my insider threat investigators, right, where I needed to show how many additional cases my group could handle with one more FTE, and then start making the case to executives, like how many insider threat cases aren't being actioned today, and try to frame that in terms of what the business might have appetite for. And it requires a pretty good partnership between the security org and the business, because you need to estimate some very abstract concepts like how much does remediating a user click malware event cost a company, intersected with like what is the business appetite for applying more security controls on each user and making things less convenient to improve security. And frankly, Neil, if you have an easy answer for those two questions, then I suggest you quit this gig and go make $1 billion as a consultant.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely love it. And of course, cybersecurity is often seen as a complex and continuously changing landscape. And for business leaders, many of them would have been blindsided by the arrival of ChatGPT and generative AI this year. But for people in cybersecurity, this is just business as normal. They're always having to evolve and adapt to the latest threats, which seem to be evolving every single week and month of the year. So I'm curious, at JLL, how do you ensure that your security team stays up to date with the latest industry trends and technologies and stay ahead of potential threats? Because it's not the kind of gig that you can just clock in each day, is it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you hear that the half-life of information security knowledge is 8 months, right? And the only industry that has a shorter knowledge half-life is some arenas of surgery. So it's very critical, and it's especially critical in a year where budgets are tightening, right? And you can't just send everyone out to Vegas for week-long trainings at Black Hat and blow, 10 or 15 grand on everybody. And we've been very forward-leaning with pushing Azure training, AWS training, but also subscription with a company called Immersive Labs, doing online training specifically for jobs. Like if you want to get more into incident response or improve your skills in that, then Immersive Labs is good for, get on there and say, hey, I'd like to learn more dead box forensics concepts or something like that. And the good news is that those technologies are fairly good at getting that rote training in, but unfortunately, we're still missing that human angle, which is so important. So for instance, I was at a training last year and I got in contact with somebody in SentinelOne's leadership from that training. And my company doesn't use SentinelOne, right? But it came in really handy one day when one of our users oddly got a copy of their installer and put it on their laptop. And suddenly we had this tool we didn't control that was owning all the security functions on that asset. And that contact came in really handy there because we were, with his assistance, able to remove that. And, my concern is we're missing the group knowledge, the stuff that's not in the manual, the connections. And I look forward to having that come back when the economy improves in the industry,
100%. And in the context of global operations, I think data privacy is also a significant concern for both individuals and businesses alike. And I also suspect the rise of Gen AI, there's going to be a few users in businesses blissfully unaware entering sensitive company data into a sophisticated machine learning algorithm. But I'm curious, there's so many different challenges out there. How do you at JLL strike that balance between leveraging data for enhanced security and also respecting the privacy of its employees and clients?
Well, Neil, fortunately, commercial real estate is not an industry rife with financial or PII regulated data, right? We're not a financial institution. We have business agents that handle the investment side. And it's not like you're running someone's visa when they decide they want to buy a skyscraper, right? Like it's a different paradigm in terms of like the data we're holding. In fact, some of our data is like just public transaction data that anybody can see. But at the same time, we have individual client data, future deals, M&As, employee data, and all of that data is very important to secure. And even more so when you have your entire workforce taking laptops to coffee shops and strange hotels, right? So, privacy really does mean both securing our data from unauthorized disclosure, but also ensuring that our employees' personal lives aren't becoming commingled with, data that we're looking for and looking to keep. And responsible for. So our data loss prevention software, and we have a cloud access security broker, commonly called CASB. Those technologies really help us ensure data privacy on both ends of that equation, both what we're trying to protect and what we're trying to, give our employees in terms of their privacy enclave. And, both sides of that equation are important to ensure that we're keeping what we ought to be keeping, but not collecting on personal lives too much. So those technologies are crucial for striking that balance.
Well, a huge thank you for sharing your invaluable insights with everyone listening today. So much gold in the things that you shared for business leaders. But before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to leave one final little gift, one final insight for everyone listening. You did say a few moments ago, no softball, so I'm going to have a bit of fun with you now. So we have an Amazon wish list with books that I asked the guests to recommend. I also have a Spotify playlist with killer tunes that they can add a tune to. But I'm going to ask you now, what would you like to leave everyone listening with and why?
Oh, man, this one is easy. So it's The Final Countdown by Europe. And I have to say, Neil, I already got on your Spotify list to see if it was on there. And I'm a little shocked and dismayed that, other guests from my generation already select this. So I'm going to immortalize it on your playlist, right? So the story behind it is around 2015 or so, I had moved out to Abu Dhabi and it was like 120 degrees outside. And I was driving this terrible, tiny Volkswagen rental that couldn't keep up with the heat. And I didn't have any in-country data service yet, so I didn't have GPS. And I got totally lost and was taking all of these long, empty roads that were half covered in sand, just trying to find my way back to where I was supposed to be, right? And to be honest, I was starting to have that itchy panic that you get on the back of your neck when you realize you're really in the thick of it. And this song popped up from my iPod plugged into the aux port on this terrible Volkswagen, and it gave me the determination I needed to get back to civilization and also drive very, very fast to get there. So yeah, that's my song. Exactly.
Oh, what a banger that is. I'll get that added straight to our Spotify playlist. And for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about anything we talked about today, including Joey Tempest of Europe, whatever it might be, where would you like to point everyone listening?
Well, Neil, I run a red team and I'm a former spook, so it's not like I've got a big and robust online presence.
Yes.
But if you check my LinkedIn or get on my Twitter, which is Rockchain, or I guess it's my X now, which sounds like I'm hawking adult material, I share some insider threat industry cases, which shows that we're sort of all grossly unprepared for the complexity of that particular issue, especially in a down market where there's a lot of layoffs in the tech sector. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I got those links added to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily, along with a link to JLL, of course. Covered so much in a short amount of time there, from the top cybersecurity threats facing organizations today, JLL's strategy to help them remain secure, overcoming those different restrictive privacy laws and regulations, and even having chance to leave us with a cracking tune by Europe. So I'd love to stay in touch with you, Doug, but more than anything, just thank you for sitting down and sharing your story today.
Neil, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Wow, an absolute pleasure having Doug with us today. I think the breadth and depth of his knowledge and his relentless pursuit of ensuring top-notch security for JLL's global operations has given us some truly unique insights into the evolving landscape of cybersecurity. And I, for one, have learned more about the immense challenges posed by global operations, and by that I mean remote workforces, varying international regulations. But I think most importantly, we learn about the solutions and how technology like Tanium is changing the game, making the seemingly impossible task of safeguarding a vast decentralized system manageable and efficient. And on top of all that, he's left us with the earworm of The Final Countdown by Europe. That's going to be in my head for the rest of the day. Absolutely love it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we talked about today. So email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Threads, Instagram, whatever it is, wherever you are. Send me a quick message. Love to hear from you. And remember, stay tuned for more exciting conversations about the digital and technological world that we all inhabit now. Stay curious, stay informed, stay safe. But more than anything, just thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.